Hi, this is Ike Love, and this is my first video and about the viable alternative. People have suggested I do video blog or vlog for years, but I thought I looked horrible in video and completely refused to do it. And now I look at myself, I actually don't look that bad. So I decided that you're going to be seeing a lot more of me on video on YouTube. Anyway, um, so yeah, I write this blog called The Viable Alternative. The viable alternative is an inspirational concept, and people have asked me the definition before. And though I do have a definition on the site, I think that it'll do people who read my blog justice for me to actually verbally explain what it is. Now, for you who don't read my blog is an inspirational blog that basically describes and talks about different subjects that relate to my own personal journey in life of becoming a better, stronger version of myself. Um, So yeah, and in the end of it, I always say this is a viable alternative. But now I want to take the time to explain briefly what it is. And I think the best way, if you want to explain any concept, is to do some type of illustration or story. And it goes back to when I was about, no, when I was about, I actually was 20 years old. And 20 years old, it was a very special, unique time of my life. I felt I was coming to my own. I had a very harrowing teenage years, very rough. And at 20, I just had like what I thought was clarity at the time. I mean, you know, it's funny, we look in the past and we think we were wise, but we're actually quite stupid. And for what it was worth, I think at 20, I displayed more wisdom than my previous years. I just kind of like felt I was coming to my own, and I was inspired, and I had written this poem. And this poem basically was what I didn't know then was an encapsulation of what the viable alternative is. Um, Years later, when I was actually to formulate the concept, I can look back at this poem and say that this is exactly, if I wanted to basically illustrate some type of story about a story about the viable alternative, this poem would be it. And I think it will basically get anybody who reads it to understand on a whole on a wide level what the overview of what the viable alternative is. So without further ado, let me put this poem on the screen and read through it and discuss more of the concept after the poem, expand about what I had written, what the poem says. The parallel path. There stood the great nations of the West, powerful, mighty, rich, feared, and prosperous, the halves of the world and destiny. They meted out the lot to their less fortunate neighbors. They exploited the poor, the blind, the ignorant, the destitute of the earth, whose focus were sacrificed, identities crushed, self-respect and self-worth denied, their gifts and resources concealed, not only by the great ones of the earth, but also more pathetically by themselves, in order to gain hold of the elusive dream, to be sucked into the pool in which they didn't belong, nor were welcome. However, in the great scramble for the dream there stood an individual nation, once hopeless and trapped in the confusion, once a disenchanted competitor like the rest, that detached itself from the madness and cast the shackles of the illusion of the dream into the abyss. Its identity was no longer crushed but upheld. Its self-respect and self-worth were found. Its focus were flaunted, and in turn its gifts and resources were exploited for its own upliftment. In short, the rest of the world and their dream were all but ignored, and the insults and continuing achievements of the great ones were taken in stride, used as inspiration, or also ignored, and self was put at top priority. In time, there evolved a nation, rapidly approaching and destined to reach stature of the great ones. Without ever mimicking the dream, it was to create its own dream, a separate alternative to the first, one more realistic, one less self-sacrificing for disenchanted nations to follow. The great ones hated but respected this nation, for this to the nation of equal stature, equal clout, but of greatness of its own doing, with a dream of unique chemistry which scoffed at and challenged the great ones, and set a trail for the disenchanted ones to follow. All right, so as you see this poem, to briefly summarize, the picture I painted in this poem was in this world, there is an exclusive club of nations who are the rich, the mighty, the powerful, the ones with all the clout, and they basically rule the world, so to speak. And the poor nations want to be just like them and enter into the exclusive club. And these, the great ones, as I call them, they basically impose on everybody else their definition of greatness and the illusion. They tell every other nation, oh, you have to measure by these standards in order to determine your worth and your value as a nation. And they basically make them believe that they need their permission to be in their definition of greatness, to fit their definition of greatness, that these other nations need their permission to go and do this. And so these nations are basically scrambling to try and get their approval. And they even compete amongst themselves in order to try and outdo one another in reaching the standards set by these nations. And in the midst of doing this, they sacrifice who they are, and they give up their folk ways, they give up their unique identity. Also, they can match what the standards set by these great ones. And in addition, they also put up a lot of abuse and ridicule and scorn. They freely give away their resources so that the great ones benefit, and they receive no benefit from them at all. And in all this madness, finally, one nation stands up, says, enough, I'm done. And they basically decide to create their own dream for themselves, using their own internal resources and treasures. And they basically embark upon a path of self-discovery that leads to them actualizing their own greatness to the point where they're able to look the great ones in the eye and say, I'm just as good as you, but I made it my own way with my own unique dream. The great ones obviously don't like that because they're disturbing the balance of power, but they have nothing to do but respect them for it. And along the way of this growth of this nation, the great ones basically scoff at them and insult them, but these ones actually use their insults as fuel to continue to propel them further. And they use them as fuel and they use them as inspiration, while also looking to these nations as inspiration because they want to be great like them, but they're going to do it without sacrificing who they are. So, yeah, and in doing in going on their own path, they basically set an example for the other nations to follow should they one day have the courage to step aside from the illusion and pursue and achieve their own greatness using their own unique mix of resources and treasures. So that in a nutshell, that's basically the best way I can do in writing what the viable alternative is. This came about at a time, special time in my own life, because I was coming to certain realizations about life and myself. And I was inspired to write this because of the revelations I have about the world. And what also inspired me to write this poem was I've always been interested in the affairs of nations, but then again, specifically third world nations, and specifically within the third world nations, I've been interested in the affairs of African nations and how they can develop into wealthy nations. I'd always been kind of like disturbed at the fact that they basically take these developmental models imposed on them by the West, and which doesn't fit their unique character, and they use them to try and become like these Western nations instead of going within, take into account their own unique situations and their own unique customs and their unique history, and combining that with their own unique resources and treasures and coming up with their own developmental plan of what type of developed nation they want to be, and to create an economic miracle like the Asian nations did. So that was my second source of inspiration, was trying to come up with a solution. Well, not coming up with a solution, but just painting my own solution of how they can solve their problem. So we have both on an individual level. I was writing about myself and the realizations I had, and I was writing about also when you extrapolate that into groups, communities, and nations. So I wrote this poem. I didn't come up with a viable alternative until years later, but this best describes it. So anyway, now let's get to the definition of what the viable alternative is so we can talk about it and you can get a better understanding of what I mean when I say the viable alternative. So check it out. The viable alternative. 1. A path of transformation chosen by an individual, group, or nation in which they use the 4 pillars of self-realization, self-appointment, self-discovery, and self-actualization to shun the illusion and create their own unique reality using their own unique mix of resources and treasures that lie within. Two, any path chosen that uses the universal principles of truth to produce a desired outcome as opposed to the widely popular conventional path that is based on misconceptions or falsehood and produces either limited success or undesirable results. Example, holistic medicine versus allopathic medicine. So let's put this all together. Slow down, Ike. So we all live in the illusion. The illusion is basically a combination of lies, half-truths, misconceptions, superstitions, old wives' tales that come together to form a web that envelop the minds of people and that people follow blindly without even questioning. Now, inside the illusion, our individuality is shunned. And we are basically supposed to fit into, the more we fit into the illusion, the more successful we're considered. And the illusion has a script for everybody that's inside the illusion, according to your height, your weight, your ethnicity, your race, your country of origin, whether you were rich, poor, middle class, whether you were born with, grew up under a 2-parent household or 1-parent household. For whatever situation you had in life, you have a script of what you're supposed to accomplish. And you cannot go outside that box. And you are to look to the illusion for permission to how far you are able to go in life. You need permission to do whatever you want to do in life. The illusion has to point it to you. And if you want something and it doesn't fit into your script, you can't do it. Now, in the illusion, there are also icons that are worshipped as great. And we are to see ourselves as insignificant next to them. We are to shun our own individuality and completely, utterly worship these icons and symbols of greatness for their greatness. We are to see ourselves as mediocre, and we are to look at them in awe and to read about them, follow how they dress, and sit in awe about what they ate for dinner last night. And this is the illusion where most of people spend their entire lives. Unacceptable. This is where now, so out of the illusion, the solution to this is the viable alternative, starting with the first pillar of self-realization, where you stand up and you look at these symbols of greatness and you say, wow, these people are great because these people have their own resources and treasures that make them great. Well, you know what? I'm a unique individual. Therefore, I have my own unique resources and treasures. What will my greatness show up like? Like, I can be great like them, but I can be great in my own unique way, in my own unique style. And so you become inspired to find out about how your own unique greatness will show up, because it's so potentially unique. You're curious about what will it look like if my greatness was to come into fruition. So that's the first pillar, self-realization. But then there's a problem. You're inspired, but what else? You're inspired, so you're inspired. Nobody's giving you permission. Well, the next pillar is self-appointment, and that's when you give your own self the permission to be successful. You throw aside the script that was given to you by the illusion. You throw it aside and say, my ability to appoint myself is more important than what you say about me and what I cannot do. So screw you. I appoint my own self the right to be successful and do what I want to do and create what I want to create and be as great as I want to be. I give myself the permission. And that's when you see in life seemingly like unfit people who are not supposed to be doing something. How are they doing that? Because they give their own self the right to do that. That's the gall. That's when you see in history like stories of Frederick Douglass, a slave who was teaching himself how to read while he was a slave when it was forbidden, because reading slaves that knew how to read made them unmanageable. Well, the gall of a coon, a nigger, that's what they called him back in the day. The gall of someone like that to go and teach himself how to read and basically become free while he was still a slave, because mentally he was already free, was his self-appointment. He said, I have the right, and he had the gall to look to the illusion and say, no, I take back my power and I give myself the right to be successful. Then we have next, because now, okay, we pointed ourselves, but what else? We need to take action. So the third pillar is self-discovery. And that's the path we take to become the person, or the person we need to be to manifest what we desire to manifest. That's what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey. And that's when we take the path of failure, we fall on our faces, we get back up, we have a string of failures, we have hardship, tribulations, we have the biggest challenge of our life. And through that whole type of purging process, we become the person we are that is able to have the things that we want in life. We are able to come great through that process. And the last pillar is self-actualization, when we see everything we wanted come into fruition. That's the first part of the viable alternative. The second path of it is what I described is any alternative path to the tried and true conventional path that has only led to limited success or undesired results. The viable alternative is any path based on the truth, the universal principles and laws of that thing you desire. It's the path you take in that direction, following those rules instead of the conventional path. And to give an example is a friend of mine had, back in the day, he was a contractor and he contracted polyurethane poisoning. And through that, he had symptoms of not being able to breathe properly. He was allergic to a whole bunch of things. He couldn't sleep well, or much. He couldn't concentrate well, and he had a low tolerance to stress. Now, the path he had taken to the illusion told him to take a bunch of medication to treat his symptoms, which he had to take, and he had to take these for the rest of his life, and it had undesirable side effects. And other than that, there was nothing else they could do for him. That was what the illusion said. The viable alternative, oddly enough, was he had found desperately, he was desperate, he went to Scientologists. And the Scientologists prescribed to him a regimen of exercise, supplements and vitamins, and sitting in a sauna to sweat out the urethane that was in his body. And he said within 6 months to, I think about 6 months, within a year, he said he felt like an entirely new person. That's a viable alternative. A viable alternative is becoming rich. Viable alternative is in case, example of viable alternative is becoming rich. The illusion teaches you that you need to win the lotto to become rich, or that you need to inherit money from a dead uncle, or that you need to marry rich or rob a bank or whatever other nonsense. That's the illusion. The viable alternative says to become a person of value to that. So if you want to be a millionaire, you learn how to give the value of $1 million. That is the viable alternative. So combining the first part of the definition, which is viable alternative, the transformational path through your own unique essence, combined with the path taken, following God's universal laws and principles, combining them together, the viable alternative is a lifestyle where you are able to manifest your unique greatness and have the maximum success because you're following the rules and laws that were set to do that thing. So that's a viable alternative. So now, to give an example, I'll look in my own life. I look at my own internal resources and treasures. I have a great memory. I'm very intuitive. I can read people very well. I am a great writer. I'm able to inspire people. I have a great physique that I don't have to work too hard for. And these are just some of the things I have. And so the challenge is, how can I take my own unique resources and treasures and create my own unique greatness out of that in a way that the world has never seen before? But they're going to see it anyway because they haven't seen it anyway because I'm a unique individual. But and even someone has the same gifts as I do, mine manifest differently because I'm a different person. So that is an example of how I can follow the viable alternative. And along the way, I want to be healthy, so I follow the rules of health. I want to be balanced in other different ways, spirituality, things like that. And those I follow, the viable alternative away from the illusion. So I turn the question on to you. You have your own unique mix of internal resources and treasures. You have, you may have a great talent to write. You may be able to dance very well. You may be able to have a great salesperson. I mean, a bunch of different things. You may have curiosities about yourself, curiosities about life, and that is actually a gift too, because curiosities lead you to a certain path where you can find something about yourself that you never knew you had you not followed that curiosity down a certain path. You may have passions. There are certain things in the world that you're totally passionate about that you're wondering why nobody else cares about it but you. That is a gift. So the challenge is, how can you take that gift, those gifts that you have, and what do you uniquely want to create out of it? I mean, the thing that you can create, nobody else can create, the greatness that can come out of what you have. And you can imagine yourself, someone reading about you 100 years from now, 200 years from now, about you, the icon, because you manifested your greatness. What will this book or piece of literature be saying about you? What would it be saying about your greatness, about how it came up and how you changed the world, or how you affected the world? This is like the gift. This is the viable alternative when you follow that transformational path and learn to bring out and manifest your own unique greatness. So, hope I didn't go too long in this. In other videos, I'm going to describe my own personal life and how I came to this and my own unique trials and tribulations in life. And I'll also share with you examples in the future. But in the meantime, this is my first of many videos. I ask you to subscribe to my video, and I also have a link to my site here where you can read about my blog and the different boneheaded mistakes I made and the lessons I learned from it, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes as I did. So thank you for watching. Wishing you much success on your unique path of the viable alternative, and many blessings. Take care.